Hey, everybody. It's your old pal Tom here on the Tom Gulley Show. This time, let me tell you about the 1996 Everest climbing disaster, where a whole bunch of people went up, but they didn't come down. I'll be getting deep into this topic, and I'll be saying some things that probably aren't very popular with people that like to climb things. But that's too bad, because, well, I mean, why would you? I mean, I'll get into it, but seriously, if you had a hobby where you went off to do your hobby, maybe tiddlywinks, maybe macrame, maybe, I don't know, collecting shot glasses from various states in the union, okay, and you came back from your hobby and you were missing toes and fingers and noses and ears, and you know what I'm saying? Was that a good hobby? I don't think that's a good hobby. Anyway, this is our cold open that we do for our audio podcast folks. And by the way, our YouTube folks can listen to these babies too if you ever just don't want to watch the video stream. If you're out and about, if you're active, if you're raking leaves, if you're, you know what, the things that you do better than I do. Why am I trying to come up with a list? You can also listen to our audio podcast. And we need a lot of people doing that. And we need a lot of people supporting the show in terms of likes and shares. Lucas Malago and Bigga seem to be the only people that do it. And Ed Robertson when I do a TV, one of them. And that's it. All the people I'm looking at in the chat room right now, well, Randy does do some of that stuff. The chef does. He likes all of them and shares them on Facebook. So, but a lot of you, yeah, I'm looking at you. You know who you are. I'm not mad at you. I'm just saying, would it kill you? Please. You know, help a fella out. And then there's the money thing. If we don't reach our financial goal to get paid every month, which is $100 over the month, I don't know why I'm doing this. That's like $5 a show. Come on. If a kid came to your front door wanting money for his band, you'd buy $5 worth of candy bars. You know you would. I'm sorry. Is it coming through? I'm not in a great mood right now. Here, let's lose more subscribers. Anyway, this is for our live streaming people to get into the chat room, and I love them to death, and I appreciate their support. But meanwhile, I got to play a couple songs. And one of the songs is kind of old-timey, but it's still peppy. And the others is named kind of after the show. All the shows are Let Me Tell You About, and it's Let Me Tell You About the Groove. And I listened to that song 10 or 15 times before I finally realized, oh, hey, this is like, in homage to my show title. That's how stupid I am. I didn't pick up on that for quite a while. Let me tell you about the 1996. Oh, wait a minute here. The Guido Samurai has joined the Gullerinos. Thank you. He has become a member. What is that, Guido? Is that $1.99 a month or is it $2.99? I forget. Thank you. See, just doing that. You do that, and then it's a whole month. You know, you don't have to do anything else. All right, let's get these songs out of the way. And then I'm going to tell you all about, then let me tell you about the 1996 Everest disaster of dumb people. Well, they weren't all dumb, but several of them were dumb.
Sometime in the night, somewhere past the evening light, There's a man talking just out of sight, making sense of the wrong and the right. Somewhere past the talking head, some time to ignore what they said. There's a chair, a desk, a glowing sign, and Tom Gulley's right on time. No scripts, no nets, no safety rails, just sharp ideas and strange little tales. You listen and you lean back slow and just let it go. We're in with Tom Gulley tonight, where the questions land just right. Laugh a little, think a little more than you did before. Happy we'll be when we hear the signals loud and clear. You won't be touching that dial once you're here. Sometime when you know he's there, somewhere in the evening air, there's a light, a clock, the studio glow, and Tom Gulley's running the show. Callers roll in, the clock spins around, truth and nonsense both get found. Every night's a brand new ride, with Tom as the guide. No scripts, no nets, no safety rails, just sharp ideas and strange little tales. You listen in, you lean back slow and just let it go. Questions land just right. Laugh a little, think a little more than you did before. Happy we'll be when we hear the signals loud and clear. You won't be touching that dial once you're here. I know it, without a doubt. That theme comes on, I'm locked in now. Everything just fades away when Tom starts to have his say. Till the sign-off draws near. No more searching, no more scrolling. You'll stay with us right here. Let me tell you about
Hey, everybody, what's going on? What's hot? What's hip? What's happening? What is shaking? Tonight, let me tell you about the 1996 Everest disaster. Not the worst disaster in loss of life ever on Everest at this point in time, but probably the most publicized and the most covered and the most made movies of and things of that nature. And, you know, what did you think was going to happen when you decided to climb that mountain and you hadn't climbed any mountains before? I mean, what did you... We'll get into it. It's difficult. There's two sections of people. There's people that are serious mountain climbers. That's what they do. They're good at it. They train for it. And then there's everybody else. But before we get there, real quickly, do me a favor. Please like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. These are absolutely free things you can do. And I forgot my ring tonight, so the whole show is really going to go in the dumper. These are free things that you can do. They only cost you a click, and they help us out so much. They help us out like a Sherpa, if you will, at 27,000 feet in the sky without bottled oxygen. Anyway, also you can go to the TomGulleyShow.com. Our merchandise store is there with a wide variety of top quality name brand items that will add a focal point of praise and pleasure to any room. You'll earn the esteem of all those who know you. Trust me, you really will. With that being said, let's get to our chat room very quickly, and then we'll get into it. The Guido Samurai is here. He says, this is going to be a banger. You got that right. Gilman is here. He says, crevices, some would say, crevasse, who knows, are nightmarish. Hey, Tom, great topic. Thank you. Johnny Book says, tell it. I'm gonna. Guido is laughing. The chef is here getting ready, he says, to watch IU, Indiana University, win the championship and listening to the Tom Gulley Show. That's the prescribed mixture. And by the way, is it not just fundamentally wrong that you have to have ESPN to watch the national championship? Shouldn't it be on ABC? Shouldn't it? I'm just saying, as an American. Guido Samurai has become a member. We do have memberships and gifted memberships, and he has become a member. Welcome to the Gullerinos. That's our membership group. I don't even know how much it costs. I thought it was $2.99. He says $4.99. I don't know. But whatever you did, thank you. And if you just do that for the month, you're good. You're good. And sorry about pandering in the cold open. I'm sorry. He also says Gulley and Jesse are about the only shows I'd pay for monthly. Jesse P.S. from the Pod Awful Cult. That's rarefied air to be compared or even mentioned in the same sentence as Jesse. That's big stuff there. I appreciate that. And then he says, the nubs of Everest, what are they made of? Mostly bone. And I will show you some nubs. You will see nubs. Ladies and gentlemen, on the program tonight, I will be showing you nubs. Sky has rocked the house with a 99-cent super chat. Thank you, Sky. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. Gilman says, let's go Hoosiers. And I'm from Kentucky. Fooey, I think. Hurricanes. It's an F. I don't know. Fooey is what I think he's saying. Chef says, yes, I had to spend $4.99 for a day subscription just to watch the game, and I live in Indiana. See, that's wrong. I think you can listen to it on the radio up there, Chef. My mom can't see it. She's got DirecTV, but she doesn't pay for ESPN because she's a mom. What's she going to do? She's really interested in Big East basketball. No, she doesn't watch it. I don't know if my dad gets it or not, so... Anyway, let me tell you about the 1996 Mount Everest climbing disaster. And it was a disaster. And there's a lot of issues that go into this particular climb, largely because it was so well documented and so well covered. I'll get into that in just a second. And also because Everybody that was even nearby wrote a book about it. And I'll be showing you some of those books. I watched 5 documentaries on this today while I was doing other things up in the corner of my computer screen. So I know a lot about this. Also, what do we got here? Sky at $1.99. You're welcome, Tom. H2BH, happy to be here. Just for that, I'm going to play Happy to Be Here on the outro of today's show. Just for you, Sky. I'm going to play the Happy to Be Here song. All right, here we go. And by the way, while I show this first graphic, this one here, that is Mount Everest, okay? I think that's the north face, because you got to know which face, because it's important. But while you see this graphic, you may hear some noises in the background, which may or may not sound like an old man getting up from a chair really fast and grabbing his lucky power ring that he wears for every show without fail. It could sound something like this. I'm back. I didn't even knock my microphone over. That's beautiful. Okay, here we go. The 1996 Mount Everest disaster occurred on May 10th and 11th because one day just isn't enough for people to expire on a mountain. And this was in May of 1996 when 8 climbers were caught in a blizzard while attempting not to get to the top of the mountain, but to get down from the top of the mountain. And there's a couple of things we're going to have to go over here, first of all. Most people that pass away on Mount Everest do not do so on the way up. They do so on the way down. Why is that, Tom? I hear you cry out. Well, it's because over a certain altitude, I believe it's 26,000 feet, you are in what is known as the death zone. And this is just me, and I've said it earlier in the show. If you're a professional mountaineer, because many people have made it to the top without supplemental bottled oxygen, that's the thing you're fighting against. Oxygen. There's very, very, very little oxygen as you go higher and higher and higher and higher up the mountain, and you have to acclimatize yourself for that. Well, certain mountaineers have gone up there without any. But because getting to the top of Everest has become such a status symbol and has become so commercialized that many people who aren't real serious mountaineers go up and they desperately need that bottled oxygen. Either way, whether you have the oxygen or not, over a certain altitude, you are literally dying while you are there. Now, you're not dying fast, because, well, that would be merciful. No, you're dying very slowly. To say nothing of the temperatures of negative 40 degrees up to negative 70, 80, 90 wind chill factor, you can expire just from the weather, right? So that's why people die on the way down. You have to realize that for the last 1,000 feet up, every step you take is like you are walking through wet cement. You are at the brink of total exhaustion. Just moving one step forward requires every ounce of strength you have, and not just strength. Remember, your brain is being depleted of oxygen. You are not thinking completely clearly. You have to have 100% total focus and concentration just to keep moving. Then you reach the top. Exhilaration, adrenaline. It's the way down. And if a blizzard strikes, as it did in this case, and if there's a bottleneck of people because there are too many and you don't get to the top until too late, or as in this case, if you take an hour and a half at the top to celebrate because your main guide hasn't gotten up to tell everybody to go down, you're in trouble. And I mean trouble with a T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. Yeah, we got trouble right here in River City. All right. Incidentally, as I mentioned before, this was the most deadly climbing event on Everest at the time. Since then, and we're going to cover these, this was 8. There were 23 fatalities because of avalanches caused by the 2015 Nepal earthquake. And then in second place, 16 fatalities of the 2014 avalanche. Yes. But this one was the most publicized. And everybody wrote memoirs about this. John Krakauer, who was a journalist, and he was actually on assignment from Outside Magazine, published Into Thin Air, which is probably the most famous because it was made into a movie and was also a bestseller. Anatoly Bulkriev, a guide, he felt like John Krakauer's book did him a disservice, so he wrote a response to it called The Climb, Tragic Ambitions on Everest. Beck Weathers, I'm going to cover Beck Weathers, a gentleman I've actually met, and Lenny Gamelgard wrote about their experiences. Beck's book was called Left for Dead, My Journey Home from Everest. Little foreshadowing there. And Lenny Gamelgard's book was Climbing High, A Woman's Account of Surviving the Everest Tragedy. Yes. A bunch of other people did. We may get to those. We may not. We may not. We may not. Who cares? I mean, who really cares? Everybody wrote a book. Good. Fine. All right. So here is the first of the 2 main expeditions. And by expeditions, I mean these are companies who basically said to people that weren't really qualified, or some that were really qualified, hey, I'll get you to the top of Everest. And they charge a lot of money to do this for you. I'm just going to tell you right now, one of the people that was taken up there was a very rich socialite. And she, in years later, has said, no, none of the things they said about me was true. But I do know this. They had to do what was called short rope her to a Sherpa. And the Sherpa basically drug her up the mountain. Okay? What's that say about, I climbed Everest? Okay, well, you bundled up and you... All right, so this particular company is called Adventure Consultants. And they had 19 people going up, 8 of whom were clients. The rest were guides and Sherpas. So the main guy here, and we're going to get into his story, is this gentleman here. His name is Rob Hall. And folks, if you are a mountaineering person and you're into that lifestyle and you actually climb mountains and you're serious about it and you don't care that you didn't climb Everest and you're climbing them and getting better and progressively going higher, and it's a discipline for you, and you train when you're not in the mountains, and then when you are in the mountains, you do the right things, you eat the right foods, you acclimatize yourself to the altitude properly, so you don't get one of the 2 things that you can get up there: medical conditions, HAPE, H-A-P-E, high altitude pulmonary edema, or HACE, high altitude cardiac something, I don't know. Both of those can kill you too, especially the pulmonary edema. Good stuff. This is Rob Hall. He was 35, and he had been taking people up Everest for quite some time. He was extremely experienced. He was known to be extremely conscientious, and from all accounts, a great guy. But I mean, if you're a great guy, really, seriously a great guy, well, I'll get to that in a little while. I'll get to it in a little while. Another of the guides was a gentleman by the name of Michael Groom. Michael Groom. I thought I had his... There he is. All right, there's Michael Groom. Now, here's another little bit of foreshadowing. That's Michael Groom. Oh, by the way, on the right there, those are feet that have been frostbitten. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you before I get off of this horrible visual. We'll go back to Rob Hall. He doesn't have any of that. If something turns black in terms of frostbite, they don't just put lotion on that and hope the skin will regrow itself. No. That's coming off. That's coming off. You're not going to have that for as long as you might have liked to have possessed that particular appendage and or skin region. Another of his guides was this fella, Andy Harris. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that both Rob Hall, did not make it down. And Rob Hall's story is actually kind of courageous. It's also kind of... It's a thing that you shouldn't have to do. I'll just cut to the chase. Rob Hall tried to save one of his clients. And was stuck on the mountain. Way up on the mountain. At a place where the Sherpas couldn't get to him because of the weather and everything else. Oh, but he did have a radio. And he was able to radio down and be patched through to his wife. He was from New Zealand. His wife was back in New Zealand. And she was carrying a child. So he got to talk to her before he just expired up on the mountain. Imagine that conversation. Isn't that great? Isn't this a great pastime or vocation? Anyway, Rob Hall did not come off of the mountain. And neither did Andy Harris. He disappeared near the South Summit while assisting Rob Hall. Disappeared. Rob Hall's clients were a gentleman named Frank Fishbeck. Frank Fishbeck, 53. Now, Frank had attempted Everest 3 times before, and he actually had reached the South Summit in 1994. Now, this guy sounds to me... He was 53, but he sounds to me like, hey, I'm serious about this. And if he reached the South Summit and decided to go back, it's because he has brains in his head. Because these Sherpas and these guides, they will tell you, if you get to a certain point and they go, you need to go back. A lot of people don't. And those people have never come off the mountain. They're still up there. They're no longer with us. If they say you need to stop, you need to stop. But some of them are just bullheaded, and they keep going anyway. Another of his clients is this guy here. Oh, sorry, you can't see him that well. Well, if you want to see him, learn how to climb Mount Everest, because that's where he's at. He had also previously attempted, and with Rob Hall's team, to climb Everest in 1995, and he disappeared near the South Summit while descending with Rob Hall. So let me repeat this. This gentleman had reached the summit with the adventure consultants. He climbed Everest, but on the way down, became unable to move, incoherent. Rob Hall stayed with him and tried to help him, and that's what cost him his life. By the way, Doug Hansen's 46 years of age, serious, really awesome climbing guy. No, he worked for the Postal Service, but he just had to climb Mount Everest. Just had to climb it. Another was Lou Kasishki. He had climbed 6 of the 7 summits. Those are the highest summits in the world. Sounds like a serious guy to me. He was fine. This guy here, and I watched a whole documentary that was nothing but him doing this, talking about the experience. John Krakauer, a journalist on assignment from Outside Magazine, an accomplished technical climber. He grew up in Oregon. He was technically very good at climbing things, but he had never, ever climbed a peak over 8,000 meters. That's the measurement they used for these really extreme, hard-to-reach summits, is 8,000 meters. He'd never done that, but he was being paid to be there to cover this particular ascent by a magazine, and that will play a part in this story a little later on. Now, another of the adventure consultant's clients was this woman, Yasuko Namba. She had climbed 6 of the 7 summits, and she became the oldest woman to summit Everest at that time. She lost her life on what they call the South Col. Now that just means, col is a word that means valley, and that's where she perished. I can show you a map, because what would this be without a map? Okay, so you see sort of, I don't know, a little less than halfway up on the right side, the South Col. That's where she passed away, right there. Right there. That's where she passed away. Another guy was named John Taskey. He was the oldest climber on the Adventure Consultants team. He was 56 and had no 8,000 meter experience. But then we get to the guy that I've actually met, a fella that I met once. And that fella's name is Beck Weathers. There he is. He's the guy on the far left. And I promised you nubs, didn't I? Well, if you look at Beck's left hand there, I don't know why he's making that face. I don't think it's permanent. His nose has been heavily reconstructed. It looks pretty good right in this picture. But it's been almost 30 years or whatever. It's had a long time. And he was a pathologist, anesthesiologist, I think maybe. A very wealthy man, a very, very wealthy man. So he had the money to do that, I guess. Beck had been climbing for 10 years, but had no 8,000 meter experiences at all. And here's Beck. Here's another comparison. There's Beck after he got off the mountain. See all those black areas? Yeah, those are coming off. His nose coming off. And you can see he's been really reconstructed. Now, it didn't always look that good. It didn't look that good when I met him. Not at all. It didn't look nearly that good. But kudos to him for having the amount of whatever that you need to have. But he lost his right arm up to pretty much the end of that bandage. Lost his whole hand. And then the other hand, as we mentioned. Well, there you go. Did I promise you nubs? I promised you nubs. So that other right arm's got like a tool at the end of it, I guess. And then the other is sort of a 3-fingered. So there's Beck. There's Beck. Did you have a good time up there, Beck? Was it worth it? Was it really? I don't know, man. Anyway, and then there were Sherpas. There were quite a few Sherpas that went up. Those were the climbing Sherpas. And then there's other Sherpas that work at lower elevations who do other duties for both of these companies. Most of the climbing Sherpas require them to ascend to at least as high as Camp 3 or 4. There's 4 camps. When you leave Camp 4, you ascend to the summit. Not all of them do summit. The expedition leaders really thought only a select few of the climbing Sherpas would make the summit. There's a legendary Sherpa named Sardar Apa Sherpa, and he was scheduled to accompany the Adventure Consultants group, but at the very twist of fate, he couldn't because of a family commitment. So he was not on this expedition, which is notable because sometimes these extremely legendary Sherpas can, persuade someone that otherwise would say, no, I'm going, man, I'm going. They can sometimes, just their reputation and stuff can make people do smarter things, let's just say. Now, with the exception of the Japanese woman, Yosaku Namba, I think I don't want to get Yasuko, Namba. None of the clients on Rob Hall's Adventure Consultants team had ever reached the summit of an 8,000 meter peak. And only Fishbeck, Hansen, and Hutchinson had previous high altitude Himalayan experience, which is it's extremely significant. Okay? Being able to not just train yourself and have your body in a condition, to acclimatize to the high altitudes, just the knowledge of what it will take, the experience of feeling it, the experience of knowing, hey, I need to stay at this camp a little longer, or I need to do more sleep, or I need to get more, or whatever it is. And being able to measure all those measurements, your pulse ox, and knowing how much, they have devices that will tell them how much oxygen they're actually processing at that altitude. Not everybody gets the same amount of air. That's why you acclimatize, so that you can get the most air out of the thinness of the air up there as possible. Rob Hall had also brokered a deal. And this is the thing about John Krakauer, okay? And I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying it had an effect on what went on here. He brokered a deal with Outside Magazine for advertising space for Adventure Consultants in exchange for a story about the growing popularity of commercial expeditions to Everest. Now, John Krakauer here, he was originally scheduled to climb with Scott Fisher's Mountain Madness team, the other group that was commercially trying to make this ascent. But Hall got him on his team, at least in part, by agreeing to reduce Outside's fee for Krakauer's spot on the expedition team to less than it would cost them to feed him, for the oxygen, to pay the Sherpa, all that stuff. He got a sweetheart deal, okay? And there is speculation by some people that because of this coverage, because of the feature story they were going to get, and I assume the video that was being shot and everything else, there was a lot of pressure on Rob Hall to take these people up. And you'll see as we get to the timeline, I'm just covering the people that went up there right now. When we get to the timeline, there were a few things that happened that probably at some point a bunch of people should have turned back. A bunch of people. This is the book that John Krakauer wrote, by the way, Into Thin Air. It's a big seller. They made a movie out of it, and yada, yada, yada. Now let's look at the other group that was going up. Mountain Madness. Led by Scott Fisher. 19 people. 8 of them were clients, very similar to the other group, right? This is Scott Fisher right here. He was the expedition leader, and he died on the Southeast Ridge balcony, about 1,000, little over 1,000 feet below the South Summit. And when they say the South Summit, That just means it is a summit of sorts. It's just not the summit, if that makes any sense. Okay? It's the South Summit. So, not really listed here on this map, but you can kind of see where the South Col is. The top of the South Col is the South Summit. You reach the top of the South Summit, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, and then you get to what's called the Hillary Step, which is a ridge that goes all the way up to the summit. A very narrow one, by the way, that only allows for one-way traffic, which can create a bottleneck. So Scott Fisher is leading this team. And for those of you who are being very aware during this broadcast, which you should like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell right now. It only costs you a click. Super chats, memberships, all that good stuff. TomGulleyShow.com. It's in the YouTube description. All this stuff's in the YouTube description. Sorry, audio podcast people. But the link to the TomGulleyShow.com is on all the podcasts. Merchandise store. All that. It's in our YouTube description. Those of you paying very close attention will have noted that both of the expedition leaders perished on this particular ascent. So the guys that were leading both groups, they died up on that mountain. Yeah. Now there's another guy. Let me see. I thought I had a picture of him. Maybe I don't. And if I don't, I should. Oh, here he is. A guy that went with Mountain Madness. His name is Neil Beetleman, professional mountaineer. You're not doing this guy justice when you say professional mountaineer. He's a guy that would run 100-mile marathons. Yeah, I said it, 100-mile marathons. He also does design of satellites for NASA. And he's much older now, obviously. He looks like this. He looks super young. He's still in amazing shape. He still climbs. And he very heroically did a bunch of things on this that saved people's lives. He really did. Received a big mountaineering award for it, as well he should have. He also was the first one from Mountain Madness to reach the summit. So while he was there, some of his clients arrived, but Scott Fisher was down the mountain trying to help some people, and therefore Neil Beetleman was like, well, should we go down? Are we waiting for Scott? What's going on here? Which created a problem. Not Neil's fault. He was just following protocol. That's all he was doing. He was just being a good guy. Now here is another dude that I'm not mad at this guy at all. Anatoly Bukreev, professional mountaineer. He was awarded the David A. Souls Memorial Award, which by the American Alpine Club, which is an award for valor. Okay? Now, he took a lot of criticism from John Krakauer. Why? Because he didn't use bottled oxygen. Because he's a real mountaineer. He's a professional mountaineer. And John Krakauer asserts that, well, if he'd have had bottled oxygen, he could have done so much more for so many people. And he was criticizing for after he summited, he went back to Camp 4. And his very logical explanation was, I went back to Camp 4 to wait to see if people needed help, because then I would be able to bring them additional supplies like bottled oxygen. He didn't have any. Nobody at the top has any. Theirs is all gone. So he went back to get, hot water, hot tea and things of that nature. Anatoly Bukreev went back into that blizzard by himself and brought back 3 people. So I think John Krakauer's just a little bit off his rocker. I really do. I really, really, really do. before we get to the clients of Mountain Madness, why don't I get some of your chats? Because there's quite a few of them here. There's quite a few of them. Let me see here. Johnny says, Jesse and Tom always makes me happy to be here. Thank you. The Guido Samurai says 33% less. 33%, when you get to that summit, you're talking like 17% oxygen. It's bad. Strobler, I never know how to say this. Stroberdoble says, I guess I'm just a gully head now. You are, my man. You are a gully head now. Guido says, if you're the type of person who will sleep better tonight, knowing how these people died, yes, you are a gully head. You'll sleep better knowing how these people perished. Yeah. The Guido Samurai says, how did they not know about the incoming blizzard? That has never made sense or been explained well. It really hasn't. But as I understand it, that area in Nepal, it's not like there's just Everest and there's no mountains around it. It's surrounded by huge mountains. And it is extremely difficult, next to impossible, to predict some of, not all of, but some of these weather patterns. And Nepal is a very poor country. It might not have the greatest of technology up there. Back in the old days, they weren't taking people up commercially, and they may not have considered it necessary. Like, well, these mountaineers know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Guido says, Beck the Nubs Weathers. Yeah, he gave a speech. Look, I worked for a big ad agency. And one of the owners of the ad agency apparently knew him. He also knew Stephen Sondheim, who came and played music for us one time, which it's a bigger story than just that. But Beck Weathers came, and he gave us an quote-unquote inspirational speech. And I met him. He was a very nice gentleman. And I take my hat off to him for his will to live. There were other people on that mountain they left knowing that they were probably going to perish. And Beck Weathers, he found the fortitude, the strength somehow, after he'd been left, to stagger into camp hours and hours and hours after they left him in just negative 70 wind chill factor weather. So that part's amazing. But what else are you going to do? I mean, I just don't go, hey, it's like, don't get in a situation like that. Might be the better tale. You've never climbed over 8,000 and you're going to try to summit the tallest, probably second hardest to climb mountain in the world. Maybe that's the better message to take away from all that. You know what I mean? If you've never played football before, maybe you shouldn't try to play in the Super Bowl. I'm just saying. Guido Samurai said it was all true. The Sherpa carried her like Yoda. Yeah, we'll get to her in a second. Terry Nee says, is he the one who called his wife? Beck Weathers? No. Rob Hall is the one that called his wife. Terry's very fond of pronouns. Not real big on proper nouns. Let's see. To Catch a Predator, Hansen. No, not that Hansen, Terry. Guido Samurai says, he tells and says, meet me at the top of Everest. Oh, no, I can't read that. Nubs. He literally has claws from his fun little hobby. Yeah. Judy Tester says, Bill Brasky. Why have I got Anatoly up there for so long? Why don't I put another picture of Everest up? That'll make people happy. Let me get another Everest picture. I know I have some. There's the Hillary step. I thought for sure I had a whole bunch of pictures of. There's Anatoly's book. There, do a little business for Anatoly. Terry says, feels that cold out there tonight. It is pretty cold out most places tonight. The Guido Samurai says, wouldn't you? Wait a minute. Mountain Madness was the X Games punk rock mountain climbing group in a way. Well, Scott Fisher was known as sort of the rock and roll guide. He was kind of known as that guy a little bit. CIA says, sounds like these mountaineers get a pep talk telling them to trust the process. You, CIA, I hate how we don't take the fight to a 17th place team. We just go out there and think, oh, we'll get a goal eventually. And then everybody's screaming about that obvious penalty, which it was, but that doesn't mean they're going to call it, and you can't depend on that. I'm like, hey, man, that happens. We go score a real goal. Anyway, let's see, Guido Samurai, wouldn't you give them a pep talk if you were herding idiots to their demise for $140,000 a head? Yeah, it's expensive. And some people, believe it or not, who have died subsequently, there are cut rate budget mountaineering companies that are only going to charge you like a tenth of that, but your bottled oxygen is going to freeze up and stuff. It's ridiculous. CIA says, are 100-mile marathons not called ultra marathons? I don't know what they're called. I just know he ran 100 miles. Terry says, does weather pressure zones affect climbing success? Yeah, it has to. Goat says the weather is way too unpredictable, except you can kind of see it coming because you're so high up. Guido Samurai says the only other person than Beck that has a more horrifying story was the Japanese guy. I can't remember his name. Goat says calling another man's pronoun guy is fighting words these days. Terry says grammar Nazi. CIA says don't get in the way of Darwin taking care of the gene pool. Terry, it's just that when you say is he, I don't know who you're talking about, you see. I'm not a grammar Nazi. I just would like to know specifically who you're referring to. I'm doing a show here, Terry. I'm not like you. I don't know everything. I'm just kidding. Terry's a good egg. And Terry Nee invented paper clips. He did. Most people don't know that. So the clients on the Mountain Madness team, so we can get everybody straight, were Martin Adams, 47. He had climbed Aconcagua and Denali, which used to be called Mount McKinley, and Kilimanjaro. Although I'm going to tell you right now, climbing Kilimanjaro, you don't even need climbing gear for that, really, just hiking boots. But if you're going to climb one of the tallest mountains ever, make it Kilimanjaro. You don't have to have special skills for that at all. Make it that one. Let's see, did I get a picture? Yes, I did. This is Charlotte Fox. She'd climbed all 53 of the 14,000 feet peaks in Colorado, and she did have 2 8,000 meter peaks, Gasherbrum 2 and Choi Ayu. And so she did have some experience, as did Lenny Gamelgard, who was 35. And so she had experience. Dale Cruz, longtime personal friend of Fisher's and the first to sign up for the 1996 expedition. Do I have a picture of Dale Cruz here? I don't think I do. Tim Madsen had climbed extensively in the Colorado and Canadian Rockies, but had no 8,000 meter experience. And then this woman, Sandy Hill Pittman. She had climbed 6 of the 7 summits, but this is the socialite. You sometimes hear her referred to as Sandy Pittman. She's the one that had to be short roped and drug up the mountain. And she's come out in several articles and said, defended herself like crazy, but too many people on the expedition said she brought gourmet food with her. She brought a television with her. She, you know what I mean? And then Pete Schoening, one of the first to climb Gasherbrum 1 and Mount Vinson, known for single-handedly saving the lives of 6 team members during a mass fall in the American expedition on K2 in 1953. He was 68 at the time. And then Cleve Schoening, Pete's nephew and a former U.S. national downhill ski racer, no 8,000-meter experience. One of the Sherpas was this guy, Losang Jangbu Sherpa, and he's like a famous one. One of the other Sherpas, Ngawang Tapchi, died a few months later from the high-altitude pulmonary edema he contracted during hauling duties just to Camp 2. Not Camp 1, or not Camp 3 or 4. And this guy was a Sherpa. He'd been doing this, right? So, now, Pete Schoening, did I mention that he's famous for climbing this one and saving these people? And he had decided, while still at base camp, not to make the final push to the summit. He said, you know what? This time's not for me. Now, that's number one, because he was experienced, and it's number two because he's smart. He's like, no, I know what goes on up there. I'm not doing that. No. So this team began the assault on the summit on the 6th of May, and they completely bypassed Camp 1 and just went straight to Camp 2 for 2 nights. Well, when that happened, one of their members, remember I told you about Dale Cruz, the longtime personal friend and the first to sign up? Yeah. He suffered from high altitude sickness and possible high altitude cerebral edema. That's the HACE. And he stopped at Camp 1. And so Scott Fisher, his friend, descended from Camp 2 and escorted Cruz back to base camp for treatment. So there you are. Now, I'm only really going to cover, for the most part, what happened to these two groups, but there was a time when these expedition, 5 people that went up at the same time, on the 9th of May, one of their members died following a fall on the Lhotse face. I'll show you where that is real quick. You can see that's just climbing up the darn thing, right? Right? There you go. You can see where it says Lhotse just to the right and above where it says Nepal. So, and by the way, that's 8,516 meters. That's 24,000 feet. So who knows how far that guy fell. But their team member, Chen Yunan, died. So there's another one of the deaths up there. And then another bad thing that happened. A group went from the Indo-Tiberian Border Police. These guys thought it would be a great idea to climb up there. And half of their team died on the northeast ridge. So you can see, probably guess where the northeast ridge is there. See where it says North Cole? It's somewhere up in that area. So half of that team. Yeah. 1, 2, 3 of them. So they had a 6-man team. So here's the timeline of the whole thing. And I thought I had a picture of the South Col here. Deck on it. I could have sworn I had a South Col picture here. Oh, there it is. There it is. There's the South Col. Yeah. You see there's like a big valley in the middle between Everest, which is in the back, and that mountain in front of it, and the other mountain, there's a valley that it creates. That's the South Col, which you come down when you're descending. But anyway, shortly after midnight on the 10th of May, so they started on the 9th, now it's turned into the 10th, it's just after midnight, that Adventure Consultants expedition began to try to get to the summit from Camp 4 atop the South Col, which I'm showing you here. And that's at 7,900 meters, about 26,000 feet, roughly. And they were joined by 6 clients and 3 guides and Sherpas from Mountain Madness. And they decided we'll just all ascend this together, as well as some of those Taiwanese people. So these expeditions very quickly encountered delays. And I'm going to reiterate, delays at this altitude are deadly, are absolutely deadly. You can't be up there very long. The climbing Sherpas and guides had not gone ahead and set what are called fixed ropes, which are ropes that, it's just exactly what it says. They're fixed. They're nailed into the mountain so that people can use those. Everyone's going to use them. It's on the way. Why have separate ropes? Why use independent ropes? These are fixed ropes. They hadn't done that. And by the time the team reached the balcony, which is 4 or 5 feet 100 more, not having those ropes already set up cost everybody, what I'm reading here says an hour, but Neil Beetleman said in a documentary I watched today, an hour or 2. And the cause of why that hadn't been done, the delay, some have said that one of the groups ripped them down so the other group would take longer instead. There's been a lot of explanations thrown out, but we really don't know because Scott Fisher and Rob Hall aren't around to tell us. So upon reaching sort of the final thing you reach on the ascent to the summit, right? The Hillary Step. And I've got pictures of the Hillary Step. This is the Hillary Step. And if you look really hard, I don't know what size monitor you're using, about a third of the way up the picture, you see you get 2 people that are on the Hillary Step. You can see this is truly a ridge. Okay? There's not a lot of room. It's not flat anywhere. And so you're going to have to go and follow that ridge all the way up to what you see there at the very top. That's the Hillary Step, named after Sir Edmund Hillary, the first person to ascend Everest. Well, one of the 3 first people. And that's at about 28,000 feet. So it's way up there, okay? So upon reaching this, the Hillary Step, I'll show you another picture of it. I don't care. I got them. And now you can see these 2 people a little bit better. I don't think it's as good of a picture, but you can see them a little bit better on the Hillary Step. That other part might just be snow. They're actually on the mountain, on this very thin ridge. Once they got to the Hillary Step, last part, you're on your way to the summit. The climbers again discovered no fixed lines had been set. And again, they were forced to wait an hour while the guides installed ropes. Now keep in mind, as always, even though these Sherpas and guides are very experienced, they're undergoing the same experiences as everyone else. Brutal cold, high winds, no oxygen, okay? So it's not just like, let me get those lines, ting, 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 ting. There's a couple of you who are enjoying my use of the term ting, ting, ting. But it doesn't just happen with the snap of a finger. So yeah, it takes an hour. But here's the worst part. And I'll go back to this other picture for just a second. Sorry about this, audio podcast people. It's a very narrow ridge at 28,000 feet leading up to the summit of Mount Everest. If you were to see it, it's no wider than even maybe thinner than a sidewalk. 33 climbers were attempting to summit on the same day, roughly at the same time. So Hall and Fisher had both asked their climbers to stay within about 500 feet of each other. Once they got to the Hillary Step, because of the delays, there was a huge bottleneck at the single fixed line at the Hillary Step. 3 of the climbers, Hutchinson, Tesishki, I can't pronounce his name, Kesishki, I'll say that's it, and Tasky, they saw what was happening, and they went back to Camp 4 because they thought, oh, I'm going to run out of supplementary oxygen. There's no way that I'm going to be able to get to the top with all these delays. I'm going back. Smart move. See, some people that have a brain in their head and can think straight and have been acclimated to this before, and they've got some sense, and they're like, this time, I'm just not going to make it this time. Not going to happen for me this time. Now, climbing without, as I mentioned before, any supplemental oxygen, Anatoly Bukriv from Mountain Madness was the very first to reach the summit. Can I repeat that a little bit? This guy's a serious climber. It's his life. I'm not mad at those people. I still think they're crazy, but I'm not mad at them. He was the first to reach the summit, which is, we'll just say 29,000 feet. It's really 29,029 feet. And he reached it at about 1:07 in the morning. Many of the climbers, he reached it at 1:07 in the afternoon. Many of the climbers had not yet reached the summit by 2 o'clock. And that is kind of universally known during climbing season as the last safe time to turn around to reach Camp 4 before nightfall. Why is that important? Because if it's nightfall, you're trying to climb back down Everest, which is the most dangerous time to climb, and you're trying to do it in the dark. Headlamps, I don't want to hear about headlamps. Doesn't sound very safe. Now, Anatoly began his descent to Camp 4 at about 2:30, having spent an hour and a half at or near the summit helping others complete the climb. Okay? And by that time, Rob Hall, John Krakauer, Andy Harris, Nate Beetleman. I got to get this woman's name right for reasons I'll tell you about later. Yasuko Namba and Mountain Madness clients Martin Adams and Cleb Shonening had reached the summit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, counting Bukriv, had reached the summit. And the remaining 4 Mountain Madness clients had arrived. After this time, Krakauer noted that the weather did not look so benign. At 3 o'clock, snow started to fall, and the light was diminishing, and I mean fast. The light was going away. Now, Rob Hall's Sirdar, which is the mountain guide that's the Sherpa who manages all the other Sherpas, okay, the head Sherpa, and other of the climbing Sherpas waited at the summit for Adventure Consultants clients, okay? They waited around. But near 3 o'clock, they began their descent. And on the way down, the head Sherpa encountered Doug Hansen above the Hillary Step and ordered him to descend. This is the Postal Service guy. He did not respond verbally, but shook his head and pointed upward toward the summit. So Doug Hansen who was ordered by the head Sherpa, who was summiting an hour after the safest time to descend, says, nope, I'm going to the top. And when Rob Hall arrived upon this scene, because he was down the mountain trying to help people, the Sherpas offered to take Hansen to the summit. But Hall said, no, you go down and assist other people that are having problems. And try to pick up some oxygen canisters on your way if you see any spare ones. And Hall said he would remain to help Hansen, who had at this point completely run out of supplemental oxygen. There's a picture of Doug Hansen, by the way. I could have found some other ones, but I thought that one was the most appropriate. So Rob Hall stayed to help Hansen, who did summit Everest. Scott Fisher did not summit until 3:45, and he was exhausted from the ascent, becoming increasingly ill and possibly suffering from high altitude pulmonary edema, high altitude cerebral edema, or a combination of both. Doug Hansen and Makalu Gao reached the summit even later. So things aren't looking good for our band of merry travelers. Okay? Let me see here. Let's go to our chat for just a second. CIA said, told you Arsenal have to get rid of the loser mentality just as well. City are leaking goals like Gyökeres isn't getting balls put into the box. No, he's not. But Gyökeres, look, they're not using him right, but he is drawing defenders in a way that a lack of a central striker doesn't. When you're trying to use any of those other piecemeals, Jesus is doing a little as well. But, yeah, I agree with you. They should have been attacking the whole time. They already knew City had lost. Terry Nee says, Tom named it a paperclip. It was so obvious. Calibration. Guido Samurai says, more like Sandy Kill Pittman. Am I right, Tom? Am I right? Yes, you're right. Terry Nee says, she's pretty. I'll give her a pass. Guido says, fair. Tink, tink, tink. The Wolf says, there is too much snow and cold up there. You'll never find J.W. Pepper up there, boy. Sky with the $1.99 super chat for me saying, tink, 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 tink. Guido Samurai says, that dude's frostbite toes look like Mersha's teeth since you brought up tink, tink, tink. Goat says, I think Tom enjoys saying Hillary Step. Well, the Hillary Step is not a dance. It's just the final part, and they named it after Sir Edmund Hillary. Hillary Step has been the last thing many people have heard. Guido's laughing at that. I'm sure it's some political thing that I don't care about. Okay, so in Anatoly Bukreev, he reaches the summit. He reaches the summit and then goes back to Camp 4. He reaches Camp 4 at about 5 o'clock. And the reasons he did this ahead of his clients are the subject of much controversy. Initially, he said he was going down with client Martin Adams, but later went faster and left Adams behind. He also said he wanted to be ready to assist struggling clients further down the slope and to get hot tea or extra oxygen. And let's face it, this dude was the first guy up. He stayed for an hour and a half without supplemental oxygen at the top of Everest and then came down. He was likely exhausted. He likely needed to get rest. If you're not rested, if you're not replenished, you can't help anybody. John Krakauer. According to him, this plan, according to Anatoly, the plan was discussed and approved by Scott Fisher. They'd already decided to do this in advance, but John Krakauer sharply criticized his decision not to use bottled oxygen while employed as a guide. And Bukreev's got 1 million supporters, including G. Weston DeWalt, co-author of The Climb. And he says using bottled oxygen gives a false sense of security. And Krakauer's people say without bottled oxygen, he was unable to directly help his clients descend. Well, suck it up, Buttercup. You wanted to climb Everest. Every half hour, I say like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. Come on, help a brother out a little, would you? And thank you for the super chats, those of you who have. It's very, very kind of you, and I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll reach our $100 goal by the end of the month. And then you and I won't feel guilty about certain people from certain verses making $100, for being a freak. The worsening weather, oh boy, started causing difficulties for all the people descending. And it was getting bad. The blizzard on the southwest face, because it was a blizzard by now, of Everest was reducing visibility, burying fixed ropes. So when one rope ended that was fixed and you went to get another one, it's buried. And that obliterated the trail back to Camp 4. So you don't know your way back now. Scott Fisher, helped by one of the Sherpas, Lopsang Jangbu, Sherpa, he was not able to descend below what they call the balcony, which is at 27,000 feet in the storm. And Sherpas left Malaku Gao with Fisher and Lopsang when Malaku became unable to proceed. Eventually, Lopsang was persuaded by Scott Fisher to descend and leave him and Gao together. Now, by this time, Rob Hall, who you remember was trying to help Doug Hansen, Rob Hall radioed for help, saying that Hansen was unconscious but still alive. At 5:30, adventure consultants guide Andy Harris, carrying supplemental oxygen and water, he started climbing alone from the south summit toward Hansen and Hall, who were at the top of the Hillary Step, not too far below the summit. John Krakauer's account notes by this time the weather was a full-on, full-scale, full regalia blizzard. Snow pellets borne on 70-mile-an-hour winds stung my face. Boukreev gives 6 o'clock as the onset of a blizzard. Several climbers got lost on the South Col during the storm on their way down. Mountain Madness guide Beetleman and clients Cleve Schoening, Charlotte Fox, Madsen, Ms. Pittman, Ms. Sandy Pittman, Lenny Gamelgard, there's Charlotte Fox, there's Neil Beetleman, along with adventure consultant Mike Groom. We'll just show him for a second for the obvious reasons. And, yes, Nasuko Namba and our good friend Beck Weathers. Yes. Wandered. All of these people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them wandered in the blizzard until they could no longer walk, huddling some 70 feet from a drop-off of the Kang Shung face. And the Kang Shung face is not a face that Bruce Lee makes in a movie. As you can see where it says Kang Shung there over to the right, well, that's the face of the mountain, and they're trying to make it through the edge of there. And they do not want to drop off of the edge of it because they would plummet. And nobody, as I've mentioned many times, ever plummets to safety or glory. Plummeting is not really recommended. near midnight. Midnight. Now, keep in mind, these people had all left 8 hours ago. They had all left between 2, 3, 4 o'clock. The blizzard cleared sufficiently for the team to see Camp 4, some 600, 700 feet away. Beetleman, Groom, Schoening, and Gamelgard set off to find help. Madsen and Charlotte Fox, they remained on the mountain with the group in order to shout for the rescuers. Boukreev located the climbers, and he brought Pittman and Fox, there's Pittman, Fox, and Madsen to safety. 3 people. Boukreev had prioritized Pittman, Fox, and Madsen, all of whom were from his expedition over Yasuko Namba, who admittedly was from the other expedition, but who is also very close to death. Now, by all accounts, Yasuko Namba was an amazingly determined and experienced climber. However, those delays, this woman weighed 90 pounds. And so many of the effects of high altitude would have affected her much more quickly and much more harshly than some of the others. She seemed near death. And he also did not see Beck Weathers, who was covered in snow and keeled over and who knows what all else. All of the climbers at Camp 4 were exhausted at this point and unable to reach Namba and Weathers. Keep in mind, they were 700 feet away. But it was during a blizzard. You couldn't see more than 10 feet. And also, I can't keep stressing this enough. Your level of exhaustion at that altitude, having summited, having been in the death zone, having done all these other things, you would have just collapsed. Imagine the most tired you've ever been in your life. Multiply it times 5 or 10. That's how exhausted you are. Imagine you've listened to 2, maybe 3 episodes of the Tom Gulley Show in a row. It's that level of exhaustion. It's inhuman. Early in the morning on May the 11th, at about 4:43 in the morning, Base Camp gets a call from none other than Rob Hall. He said he was on the South Summit, confirming that somehow, beyond all rational belief, statistical possibility, and optimistic thinking, he had survived the night. And Rob Hall reported that Andy Harris had reached the 2 men, but Dale Hansen, did I say Dale Hansen? It's not Dale Hansen. I keep saying it's Doug Hansen. Dale Hansen is a wonderful broadcaster, sportscaster here in Dallas. Doug Hansen, who had been with him since the previous afternoon, Doug was now gone. And Harris was missing. It's believed that Andy Harris fell off the south face at some point. Rob Hall was not breathing bottled oxygen because his regulator, and this is another thing that happens, was too choked with ice. The regulator for his oxygen wasn't working. By 9 in the morning, Rob Hall had managed to repair his oxygen mask, but said his hands were so frostbitten, as were his feet, that he couldn't even traverse the fixed ropes. Later in that afternoon, he radioed Base Camp, asking them to call his pregnant wife, Dr. Jan Arnold, on the satellite phone. During his last communication, they chose a name for their unborn child. And he reassured her that he was reasonably comfortable and told her, "Sleep well, my sweetheart. Please don't worry too much." Shortly thereafter, he froze to death in his sleep. His body was found almost 2 weeks later by Ed Viesters. Ed Viesters was at base camp running thing there, and fellow mountaineers from the IMAX expedition. Yes, there was an IMAX expedition following this one to take some IMAX footage of the top of Everest, but he was left there as requested by his wife, who said she thought he was where he'd like to have stayed. The bodies of Doug Hansen, the postal worker, and Andy Harris, who is just so incredibly courageous to have gone up there and tried to save those guys, well, they've never been found. Viesters stated in the IMAX film that upon finding Hall's body, he sat down and cried beside his friend. He also said that he thought about, and I saw this in a documentary today, he thought about taking Rob Hall's ice axe and presenting it to his widow, that maybe the family would like it. And then he said, no, I just didn't think I should disturb the scene at all. Meanwhile, Stuart Hutchison, a client on Rob Hall's team, turned around before the summit. Remember that guy? He launched a second search for Beck Weathers and Yasuko Namba. He found both alive, but barely responsive and severely frostbitten and in no condition to move. After consulting with the Sherpa, he made the decision that they could not be saved by the hypoxic survivors at Camp 4, nor could they be evacuated in time. Hypoxic means completely deprived of oxygen. And the other survivors soon agreed that leaving Weathers and Namba behind was the only choice. And this is a choice that is frequently made at high altitude and certainly upon Mount Everest. I don't think I'm telling anybody anything new when I say that when you make an ascent for the summit of Mount Everest, you will pass many bodies of people who have come before you and failed. There's the legendary green boots, they call him. It's just a guy with green boot. They have names for all of them. And if that's not a little bit of a reminder where you're at and what's happening, I don't know what is. But later in the day, and I know I've taken maybe a few shots at Beck Weathers, but later in the day, Beck Weathers regained consciousness and walked alone under his own power to the camp, surprising everyone there, though he was still suffering severe hypothermia and frostbite. Despite receiving oxygen and attempts to rewarm him, he was practically abandoned again the next morning, May 12th, after a storm had collapsed his tent overnight, and the other survivors thought again, oh, he's gone. He's dead. But John Krakauer discovered Beck was still conscious when the survivors of Camp 4 prepared to evacuate. Wait. Despite his worsening condition, Beck Weathers found he could still move mostly under his own power. A rescue team mobilized, hopeful of getting Weathers down the mountain alive. Over the next 2 days, Beck Weathers was ushered down to Camp 2 with the assistance of 8 healthy climbers from the various expeditions and was evacuated by a daring high-altitude helicopter rescue, one of the highest at the time. I think it was the highest ever attempted. Well, Beck survived, but as we all know, he lost his nose, his right hand, half his right forearm, and all the fingers on his left hand to frostbite. Incidentally, I'll just mention this. Beck had an opportunity. The helicopter came up, but one of the Sherpas, the one that passed away later, I believe, was in worse shape than he was. And Beck Weathers, God bless him, said, let that guy go first, because the helicopter pilot really not supposed to be able to fly helicopters at this time in 1996 up that high. Now they have certain helicopters that can. They figured out ways. But back then, no. The guy that flew the helicopter up there took a huge risk. And Beck said, let that guy go on before me. And that dude went down to base camp, and by golly, he took off again, and then he got back. But anyway, the climbing Sherpas located Scott Fisher and Malaku Gao on the 11th of May, but Scott Fisher's condition had deteriorated so much that they were only able to give him palliative care, meaning all they could do was try to keep him comfortable because he was gone. And they managed to rescue Gao. Buchreef made a subsequent rescue attempt, but found Fisher's frozen body at around 7 o'clock. So what caused all this? What made it all happen? By the way, I'll be showing various films and books and things here while I talk about this. Ineffectiveness of leadership. The expedition leaders did not realize the blizzard, which hit in full force on May 11th, would be preceded by increasing snow throughout the afternoon and evening of the previous day. They thought it was just going to be a blizzard, so they didn't expect that snow. A rivalry between Hall and Fisher, who were both incentivized to get their clients to the summit, leading them to ignore the aforementioned forecasts. They were not necessarily paying attention to things because they wanted a payday. The unwillingness of the South African team's guide to help contact base camp while the other team's radios were not sufficiently strong. And that guy ought to be strung up for that, just right there. Another reason were those bottlenecks on the Hillary Step. The big old bottlenecks on the Hillary Step. I'll ask you to look again. I've seen pictures where that thing is nothing but a long line of people. And it isn't in this photo, but it has happened. Those bottlenecks at the balcony, and particularly the Hillary Step, caused an hour-and-a-half delay in the summiting. And these delays were caused by delays in securing fixed ropes and the sheer number of people arriving at the same time. 34 climbers at the same time. The team leader's decision to exceed the normal turnaround time of 2 o'clock. Many of these people didn't even reach the summit until 2:30. The sudden illness of 2 climbers at or near the summit, like Doug Hansen, after 3 o'clock. Unexpectedly severe oxygen deprivation sickness, compromising both climbers' and guides' ability to make decisions to help others. And insufficient supplies of oxygen, forcing guides and rescue teams to carry bottles up to stranded climbers as the storm approached. John Krakauer, and I think he is right here, he suggested that the use of bottled oxygen and commercial guides who personally took care of all the path-making equipment, important decisions, all of those sort of conveniences that Edmund Hillary didn't have, and Anatoly Buchreef wouldn't need, those things allowed otherwise unqualified climbers to attempt to climb Everest. And that led to a lot more dangerous situations because people weren't smart enough to say, no, I can't do this now. And a lot of those people didn't have the physical stamina. They weren't acclimatized. They didn't know what being at high altitude or in the death zone would be like. And that's all a result of these commercial expedition companies. And John Krakauer says, my presence as a journalist may have added pressure to the guides to see that their clients summit despite these growing dangers. And he proposes banning bottled oxygen except for emergency cases. Because number one, Have you ever seen pictures of the camps on Everest? There are gigantic piles of bottled oxygen bottles, just litter and trash everywhere. It's awful. It's disgusting. And it would also keep marginally qualified climbers off the mountain. You know. And he points out that climbing Everest has always been pretty dangerous, you know, even before guided tours, with one fatality for every 4 climbers who reach the summit. And many of the bad decisions that were made on the day of that ascent came after 2 or more days of inadequate oxygen, nourishment, and rest. Because remember they bypassed the one camp and they went up there too fast? Yeah. In May of 2004, researchers at the University of Toronto analyzed weather conditions for the 11th in May, and they suggested that atmospheric oxygen levels fell by an additional 6% as a result of the storm, resulting in a further 14% reduction in oxygen uptake. Yeah. And the supplementary oxygen thing is a huge, huge controversy. All right. And Anatoly Bukreev says, and this is from his book, Mr. Krakauer raised a question about my climbing without oxygen and suggested that perhaps my effectiveness was compromised by that decision. In the history of my career, as I have detailed above, it has been my practice to climb without supplementary oxygen. In my experience, it is safer for me, once acclimatized, to climb without oxygen in order to avoid the sudden loss of acclimatization that occurs when supplementary oxygen supplies are depleted. So he doesn't want to have the huge drop-off in being acclimatized. He wants to be acclimatized the whole time. And if it's tough, so be it. But I'm not going to have a drop-off if I don't have oxygen that's supplemental. My particular physiology, my years of high-altitude climbing, my discipline, the commitment I make to proper acclimatization, and the knowledge I have of my own capabilities have always made me comfortable with this choice. And Scott Fisher was comfortable with that choice as well. He authorized me to climb without supplementary oxygen. To this, I would add, as a precautionary measure, in the event that some extraordinary demand was placed upon me on summit day, I was carrying 1 bottle of supplementary oxygen, a mask, and a regulator. Nate Beetleman said that Bukreev had brought oxygen to the balcony but declined to use it, handing the bottle to Beetleman and stating he had no need. This contradicted the original plan and Fisher's directive that guides use oxygen while supporting clients. According to Beetleman, while acknowledging Bukreev's strength and speed as a climber, Beetleman argued that going without oxygen impaired Bukreev's ability to assist others down from the summit. He suggested Bukreev didn't fully recognize his responsibility as a commercial guide, noting the consequences of prioritizing personal style over team safety. I don't think it's personal style. I think it's a guy that has lived his life in the mountains, and he knows what happens when that oxygen goes out. And he doesn't want to fall victim to that. He gave his oxygen to others. And I think it's smart for a guy who had summited before everybody else, been on the summit for an hour and a half, got down super fast because, I don't know, maybe he didn't need the oxygen, to rest, get warmed up, revitalize, and then take necessary supplies to other people who would not have otherwise had those necessary supplies. Radios. There were several issues and problems with radios and their use on summit day. Scott Fisher's head Sherpa did not have a company-issued radio, but did have a small yellow radio that was owned by none other than somebody thought she was good-looking. Sandy Pittman. Rob Hall's team also had an issue with a radio during a discussion over oxygen bottles that caused confusion. Yes. 1996 is a bit of a statistical anomaly, as the fatality rates on Everest in the 1996 season were statistically lower than normal. The record number of 12 fatalities in the 1996 spring climbing season was 3% of the 398 climbers who ascended above base camp, and that's actually a little bit lower than the historical average of 3.3%. And also, 84 climbers reached the summit that season, giving a fatality to summit ratio of 1 to 7, which is much less than the 1 to 4 prior. But you could also argue that so many people summited because they took such a huge risk. And, you know, that's the reason they had the fatalities on the way down. I don't know. Here we go. The fatalities. Andy Harris. Andy Harris, who I just think was a major hero to go up and try to help Rob Hall. Doug Hansen, I'm not going to show him again because I don't have a picture of him while he was alive. Rob Hall. Yasuko Namba. Scott Fisher, and then the members of the team from India. If you want to know, we've got the Everest film. We've got an Into Thin Air movie that was made. We've got, let's see here, Anatoly's book. We've got John Krakauer's book. We had the IMAX film, Everest. I think that's this one. We had The Dark Side of Everest, a National Geographic Channel production. We have Remnants of Everest, the 1996 tragedy, which was released in 2007 on Frontline for PBS. Seconds from Disaster into the Death Zone, a TV documentary. The movie Everest. Beck Weathers' book, Left for Dead, My Journey Home from Everest. Lenny Gamelgard's book, Climbing High, A Woman's Account of Surviving the Everest Tragedy. And Lou Kasishki's book, After the Wind, the 1996 tragedy, which he wrote in 2014, which seems to me to be a long time after all this went down. But there you go. You guys wanted a show about Everest in 1996, by golly, I gave you one. And we'll do a show on, we might combine the other two more disasters. They're both avalanches and they happened within 2 years ago. But 2 years of each other, 2014 and 2015. So we might combine those together. Don't you know? We could. We might do that. But there you are. Let me get to the chats that some people may or may not have. Dark Lellet's here. Hey, Dark Lellet. Me, barbarian. Me use snow on Everest to keep beer cold. Well, that you could, I suppose. I don't know what that would do if you drank it with the lack of oxygen. But the wolf says, don't you worry, boy. He'll catch him. My cousin Billy Bob's the fastest damn climber on the whole damn mountain. Guido Sarducci says, Guido Samurai says, how far from the tents was that? If you're talking about where they found Beck and everybody, that was 660 feet. The consultant, Mike Guido. You know what? I bet you Mike Guido has a gig in radio. I bet you he does. And that's wrong. That's really wrong. Wolf, I'm really tempted to look up Mike Guido right now. But I'm going to have to now. Me and the Wolf have a running thing about this awful radio guy. Well, it says former sports talk radio host at Worldwide Sports Radio Network. He's on Spotify. He's on Pandora. Do I need to... Mike Guido Radio, it says. So who knows what Mike Guido's doing? Let's check it out. I accidentally went to his LinkedIn. Eesh. It's going to slow down my camera speed probably now. Come on, LinkedIn. I was trying to go to his Facebook. Any year now, I'm doing a show. LinkedIn, they're supposed to. He's in Port Jefferson, New York, Mike Guido. God, is he bad. Even the wolf is down on Mike Guido. So terrible. So terrible. Oh, it says, hold on. He's a sports. Oh no, he hasn't gotten anything here since 2021. So that's good news. Boy, was he bad. And he was on a big network. And he was on a station that I sent my stuff to. And one of the guys there was super nice, but still, my frames per second just went down awful. But and it's because of Mike Guido, just to show you how bad things are when you dip your toe into Mike Guido. The huddle of people, yes, Mr. Groom, 700 beat. I've been wondering the whole time. Yeah. Terry Nee says, I've watched 5 episodes once of the Tom Gulley Show. You're a good man, Terry Nee. Old green boots. Yes, I didn't know that about Beck. Yeah. I Am Sky says, the thing I don't get is why they don't use rebreathers. What are you talking about? What? I don't understand why they would use rebreathers with that low level of oxygen. But Guido liked the show. Dark Load said, just wanted to hear the radio voice read something stupid. Who, me? I don't know that I've read anything stupid except for discussing Mike Guido, which is always a... Hey, tomorrow night on the show, we will have... if you could buy a car, brand new, mind you, for $6,800, and that car got 84 miles per gallon, would you do it? The car also is a one-seater, only holds one person. Technically two, it's got a seat in the back. And the seat in the back you can fold down for storage and groceries and stuff. And one door. There's only one side of a door. Why do you need two? It's a one-seater. Well, that's the subject of tomorrow's show. Elio Motors. They claimed they could make a car. 3-wheeler. Big giant wheel in the back. 2 IndyCar style wheels in the front. I'll show it to you. That's tomorrow. I think you're going to find it a very interesting proposition. I was all over this company right from the get-go. I was like, I would have one of those today. 84 miles a gallon? Are you kidding me, Chachi? And then on Wednesday, the boss. We will go from stem to stern, from birth to now, on the legendary Mr. Bruce Springsteen. And the E Street Band, if you want. I don't care. And then on Thursday, I'm waiting to see maybe if we get this really awesome true crime guest. There's a chance we could get this super, super awesome true crime guest. And I think we're going to get him. It's just I don't know if we're going to get him on Thursday. This is a guest you guys will really, really like. You will love it. I'm not joking. So I hope we get him or I'll look like a fool. I will look like a fool. Anyway, let's see. Judy Tester says, just breathe twice as much if there's half the O2 or whatever. It's not that easy because you're so tired. Sky says scrub CO2 and adds oxygen when needed as opposed to just being straight oxygen. It's how they do deep seething and spacewalks. Yeah. That's believe me, they've got a good reason. But I do appreciate your devotion to technology. Sky has always got deep technological. You know, That's not going to help. Those rebreathers are very small. It's how they do deep sea diving in spacewalks. I know. Trust me. If that could work, they'd have already used it. They're pouring lots of money into that stuff. Tyranny says, sounds crunchy. The Wolf says, from Bob Catterson Buick, nobody will sell you a used car lower price than Bob Catterson Buick. Nobody. Old Dave Mason will sell you a new or used car cheaper than anybody else. Why? 'Cause old Dave needs the money. That's why. Hey, I promised Sky I was going to play Happy to Be Here on the way out, and I'm going to do that. As I mentioned, tomorrow night, Elio Motors, Bruce Springsteen on Wednesday, maybe big-time guest on Thursday. Maybe I'll just put another true crime show together. Either way, it'll be awesome. You'll love it. Looking at that old clock on the wall, and it says there's a national championship football game going on involving them Indiana Hoosiers. So I got an Amscray. You don't have to go, but you can't stay here. It's like the summit of Everest. You can't stay here. And with all that being said, I see another chat. At the end of the day, it's just natural selection. There's two kinds of people that come back from Everest and those who make it back alive, and then yeah. Anyway, till next time, we'll see you next time.